and it ends in a disaster because it was not regulated. Please do not repeat that mistake. We don't want to watch this movie again, and we do not want to watch a movie that is a combination of West Wing or The House of Cards and The Big Short. Please, do your jobs, represent us, the American people, protect our financial system so we never see again what happened in 2008, 1929, so many times before. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. We'll now turn to our round of questions. We'll offer each member of the committee a generous 5 minutes. If you like, I'll start the questions off. Ms. Mersinger, digital assets and blockchain technology could democratize finance, giving every American, no matter the background, access to financial services at lower costs with greater speed than ever before. To achieve this revolutionary potential, there is widespread agreement from industry leaders to the President and bipartisan members of Congress that we must provide clear rules that foster innovation and protect investors. And listening to you, and frankly, Mr. Levin as well, I think Mr. Levin said we need a fundamentally new model because we're talking about, frankly, a fundamentally new world. It's not new today, but it's new to those of us who are going to pass legislation. And you talked about the importance of the existing laws as we see them are inadequate and frankly not applicable to this new opportunity to be the crypto capital of the world. From your perspective, why is regulatory clarity so important, and what are the risks if we fail to provide certainty for innovators and everyday Americans?
Thank you for that question, Senator. Traditional bank regulations are not fit for purpose for digital assets and blockchain technology. Those regulations are meant for centralized intermediaries, and that's not what we're dealing with here. We need a regulatory structure that is fit for purpose. Otherwise, this patchwork of regulations and state laws and the industry trying to piece together what is their regulatory framework doesn't work, and it's going to push and continue to push innovators offshore. The most important thing we can do is create a framework that gives clarity. The status quo doesn't work. We need to be able to have responsible innovation here in the United States. We need a framework that provides customer protections. And we also need to make sure that whatever framework we put in place, that it ensures that U.S. American values are what this new framework, or what this new technology is based on.
Thank you very much. Mr. Levin, there's a common belief that money laundering is easy with crypto, but the truth is, it's not. Blockchain technology creates a permanent, traceable ledger that can help law enforcement catch those bad actors. I've said it before, so I'll say it again. It's far easier to track something that has a digital footprint than something that does not. However, some of my well-intentioned colleagues seem to think that crypto is tailor-made for money laundering, when in reality, it's a whole lot easier for criminals to hide their tracks with cash. What are the most common misconceptions regarding the role of digital assets in illicit finance? And what rules do digital asset market participants already comply with in this space? You talked about, I think it was a couple $100 million that had already been seized by working together. I think the more we illuminate how the industry is already working with law enforcement, the better we understand the digital footprint versus cash.
Thank you for the question, Senator. The way that we see this market is that the majority of activity inside cryptocurrencies and on blockchains is legitimate activity. There are trillions of dollars of payments that are made using stablecoins every year. A lot of that, the vast majority of that, is not illicit activity. The illicit activity that we estimate at Chainalysis is less than 1% of the overall activity that occurs on these blockchains, which is equivalent to what we see in traditional markets, and in fact, oftentimes less than what we see in traditional markets. And so criminals themselves and gangs and whoever else we're dealing with understand that it's not possible to launder vast sums of money in these networks and that the majority of the activity is legitimate. We do see, though, that when it comes to threats, for example, with fentanyl or pig butchering or terrorist financing, the industry comes together with law enforcement to collaborate on solving these cases. And we at Chainalysis have powered thousands of investigations that have spanned international geographies, cross-national boundaries, to be able to actually capture criminal proceeds in these investigations. The centralized services that have been helpful with this are subject to the AML and BSA obligations and have been from FinCEN guidance in 2013, and so have a very deep experience in actually helping law enforcement in these instances. And it's through that public-private collaboration that we can actually, solve the problems of illicit finance.
Thank you very much. Ms. Cortez, Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for having this important hearing. Let me start with Mr. Massad. Talk a little bit about what should the goal of a market structure legislation be that we're looking at?
I think it needs to set up a process and some principles for achieving clarity and addressing this regulatory gap. The gap is that in our framework, we have no regulator of the spot market for anything that's not a security. So we need to fill that. And we need to bring some clarity to this question of when is the use of digital technology turn something into a security or a commodity. But that's much more complicated, if you will, than simply writing in, a single definition. And that's why I advocate a process. That's why Jay Clayton and I advocated more of a process of bringing the SEC and the CFTC together. You don't necessarily have to merge them, but we need to have them work together on this.
Thank you. And Ms. Mersinger, would you agree with that?
Yes, I would agree that we need a framework that's going to work for the industry. We need clear lines of jurisdiction here. And I totally agree with the SEC and the CFTC working together. In fact, they could do that right now, and they are doing that right now, working together to provide what clarity they can. But we still need legislation to oversee the spot market, and as Mr. Massad said.
Okay, thank you. Let me ask you this as well, and maybe Mr. Massad, let me start with you again. I have heard from my state's a security administrator and many of them across the country about the paramount importance of preserving states' powers in federal market structure legislation. Can you talk about why that is important?
Yes, I think it is important because the state securities authorities have always played a critical role in our system. And again, I think you're going to hear a lot of comments today suggesting this is this whole new world and so forth. It is a technology. And we got to remember what we have going on are still, most of this activity is going through centralized intermediaries. It's not just happening on chain. So I think we still need the resources of the states, as well as the enforcement resources of the SEC and the CFTC to bring to bear.
Thank you. Mr. Levin, thank you. By the way, you did some great work with Caesar's Palace. I thank you for the work that you've done. I appreciate it. And for that reason, I understand we're all concerned about the scams and the fraud that could occur, that quite honestly always occurs with some sort of new technology or something happening at the federal level. Our goal here is to make sure we're protecting our consumers and giving the regulators and law enforcement the tools in the private sector to go after that and stop that. Can I ask you, what are the biggest obstacles to identifying and recovering ransom payments or stolen crypto funds?
Thank you for the question, Senator. The biggest barrier that we find when we're looking for money that is being stolen or has been extorted through ransom is that money can move to foreign jurisdictions where there can be non-compliant centralized entities that actually hold cryptocurrency on behalf of those illicit flows. And that's where it's really important for the United States to be able to work across different geographies to be able to prevent the laundering of that activity in foreign jurisdictions.
And would you say that state and local law enforcement and regulators already have the tools they need to address those the scams?
I would say, Senator, that we are still in the infancy of state and local agencies actually having the capabilities to be able to go after these types of crime. There are instances in certain jurisdictions where the state and local enforcement agencies actually do have capabilities at their disposal, but we have found that actually there's a technology barrier to entry. And so us at Chain Analysis, we've been pioneering a lot more new technology powered by AI to actually help state and local agencies get a hold of easier insights to these types of crimes so that they can go after this activity.
What is it in the market structure regulation that we're looking at that we need to be cognizant about to ensure that law enforcement, whether it's federal, state, or local, has the tools they need?
I think it starts, Senator, with the actual regulators to actually have the tools in place to monitor the publicly available information and proactively go after the types of threats that we need, rather than overly relying on a reporting structure that we've had in traditional markets.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've listened with great interest today, and here's what I hear you saying. The four folks to my left, I hear you saying that digital assets are different. Digital assets hold great promise. Digital assets need special rules. I agree with that. The obvious question is, what should those rules be, and to what extent should we allow you to draft them? I've also heard some of you say that digital assets represent the next generation of the internet. Well, we let the current generation of the internet draft their own rules, and frankly, it looks like what we got as a result looks like somebody knocked over a urine sample. Congress can't even agree on basic legislation dealing with privacy on the internet. How the hell are we going to tackle this? But I hear what you're saying. I hear Mr. Painter, as usual, if you follow him on social media, you know, all politicians are crooks. Very helpful. I want to direct most of my questions to Professor Massad. Is that how you say your name?
Massad.
Mr. Massad. I'm really worried we're going to get this wrong. We don't know, we in Congress and our staffs don't know as much as the professionals in digital assets know. And I don't see how we can possibly catch up. Tell me more about your idea of having the SEC. Well, first, I don't want to run out of time here, but why is the digital assets industry so scared of being regulated by the SEC?
Well, I think we need to step back, Senator.
Briefly, please.
They don't want everything treated as a security because they don't want that entire framework to apply. But that's also because the SEC did fail to try to customize its rules to adapt for this technology, and it should do that. And you've got leadership at the agencies now who are working on those things.
You're suggesting that we turn to two of our agencies, one of which is the SEC, and say, you have expertise. Before we take a crack at a bill, you come up with a bill, with rules, with regulations. Tell us how to do this. Because I hear you saying in some cases digital assets are commodities, in some cases they're securities.
Congress needs to fill the gap, which is if it's not a security, who's going to create a regulatory framework for it? So you do need to fill that. But these questions about exactly when is it a security? When is it not a security? How do we customize the rules? What should we do about DeFi? A lot of that should really be left to the agencies. You could establish some principles, but I wouldn't write detailed rules.
Have you looked, Professor, at Congressman Hill's legislation?
I have in detail.
What do you think?
I think it's got a lot of problems. I think it's 236 pages of regulatory arbitrage opportunities for creative lawyers, and I used to be one that did that kind of stuff.
Made a lot of money, did you?
I did, but
Mr. Painter, do you think Senator Gillibrand is a crook?
No, and I do not think all politicians are crooks. And
Why did you call her a crook?
I did not call her a crook. Now, Ms. Senator, you need to focus
here's what
on
I'm
this
looking
bill.
right now.
You're doing this again. You did it the last
published a
hearing.
tweet that
You
said
need to
Senator
read the
Gillibrand's
bill.
role in stablecoin regulation, $217,000 in crypto donations. You tweeted that.
Yes, I
And
do.
then you said, the crypto industry is buying Congress and the White House. This won't end well. Why do you think the crypto industry is buying Senator Gillibrand?
I said, look at the campaign contributions from this industry.
Do you think they bought her?
I said, look at the campaign
You said
contributions.
they bought her. Do you think they bought her?
Senator, you need to focus on this bill instead of trying to distort my Twitter.
You
Last
called
time,
one of my
you
colleagues
were
a
quoting
crook,
what a Marxist in
and-
Chicago said
And
about
what
me.
evidence do you
Make
have
no
that she's
sense.
a crook?
I said there is massive amount of campaign contributions coming into this Congress from the crypto
Do you
industry.
want to apologize
You need,
to Senator Gillibrand?
I do not want you to have to apologize for passing
Do
legislation
you want to
that
apologize
destroys
to
our
Senator
economy.
Gillibrand for calling her
You
a
are
crook?
distorting
Crook.
what I said, just like you did in the last hearing. You're wasting everybody's time, Senator.
You're a whack job.
Senator,
You are a
wasting.
majorly
Well, I think we are,
everyone's
next
time.
level
we-
whack
You're-
job.
you-
I think we
Is
are
this
at
middle
time.
school, Senator?
Senators and witness, thank you both.
I
for
think
your
you should
part-
apologize, Senator
I think,
Gillibrand.
Senator, you're wasting our time. This is not middle school.
Thank you for your participation. I will say that Senator Smith is next. The floor is yours.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So, not so long ago, I think you could safely describe most individual investors in digital asset markets as enthusiasts, but that has changed a lot over the last few years as digital assets have become more mainstream. And I think the topic of this conversation today, looking at what sort of a regulatory framework we need for digital assets, is very important.
Jimmy.
And it's important that we don't provide just a stamp of legitimacy over this sector, but we are actually providing the kind of consumer protections that people need. Investors should be protected from fraud, from misleading information, from self-dealing, and from conflicts of interest by those that purport to be representing them. They should be protected from unfair and rigged markets. And those protections are going to be good for investors, but they're also going to be good for the market. So, Mr. Massad, I want to get at some of the what this proposed market structure legislation should look at. And we have kind of as our, the legislation that's out there, the Clarity Act. So I'm going to just try to get at some of the issues in the Clarity Act. So as I understand it, the Clarity Act would prevent any digital asset from being regulated if it is represented as a collectible, or as art, or as something that has inherent value or utility or significance beyond its mere existence as a digital asset. Do I have that right?
yes, you do.
Okay, so that seems like a pretty big loophole to me, and I want to just dive into this a little bit. So if a cryptocurrency, for example, was launched by a social media influencer, could that, in your view, have some inherent value and therefore be exempted? What about, let's say, a meme coin that might get you invited to
Yes.
dinner with the president? Would that
Yes.
have potential inherent value?
Yes.
Tesla is worth more than several of the world's largest automakers. If it were to issue a crypto stock token, would that have inherent value?
Well, that certainly would. That would be also exempted as a security. So
So
that should be still regulated as a security.
as a security, right, which
Right.
is sort of the underlying challenge, as you pointed out a moment ago. So I mean,
Here-
can you imagine a crypto asset that wouldn't have some inherent value.
Well, this is the problem. It's unclear exactly what would be categorized as digital commodities under this definition. A lot of people say it would be these native tokens like Bitcoin. I would think about it this way. Most trading today occurs through centralized intermediaries. It does not occur through these decentralized exchanges. Those centralized intermediaries list several hundred tokens. The question is, how many of those would be regulated by this? And I think it would only be a handful, and that's a real problem.
Well, exactly. Mike, this seems to me like a loophole that you could drive a truck through.
Yes.
And I don't think that that is an accident as
Correct.
this legislation has been developed. Let me touch on another issue. I think we've heard it today. Crypto industry and its promoters are sort of branding digital assets as something new, as innovative, as revolutionary, and therefore they need some sort of new or bespoke regulatory framework because the established rules for protecting investors and guaranteeing the freeness and fairness of markets don't apply. And I'm not arguing that there aren't some specific things that we need to address because of the nature of these assets. But here's an example of this. Under the Clarity Act, it would allow a crypto company to raise up to, I think it's $300 million from retail investors over 4 years, as long as they would be exempted from complying with SEC registration and disclosure rules, up to, even if they're raising up to $300 million in, from retail investors. Is that, do I have
Yes,
that right?
there's a new exemption for capital raising for building what's called a mature blockchain system.
That's right.
It does require some disclosure, but it's otherwise an exemption from securities,
SEC,
from
okay.
registration.
So if a regular company was required, would be required to disclose to the SEC how they're spending the money that they raise.
Yes, I mean, the challenge, the problem with that exemption is you don't actually have to build the mature blockchain system. You just have to have the intent to do it.
You just have to have the intent to do it, but you could use that money for, I mean, what would stop you from using it to buy a house in, the Virgin
Well,
Islands?
conceivably, there could be a lawsuit against you for misleading information. But, if you had a
That's sort
reasonable.
of like an after the fact.
Yeah, that's after the fact.
Right, exactly. Well, so this is, and I know I'm out of time here, I just want to close by saying this is my concern, is that it's not really a new regulatory regime at all. It actually is sort of continuing the status quo that has landed us in some pretty significant
Well,
problems.
I think I think the problem with the act is it's undermining the existing
Correct.
regime. We do need to customize some rules.
Yes,
But this isn't a good way to do it.
thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Chairman Scott, and thank you for doing this hearing. It's something Mr. Massad said, which I thought was fascinating, was that we've had times that we could have passed market structure regulation, and Congress hasn't done it. There hasn't ever been a market structure regulation bill marked up by the Banking Committee. So I'm just not sure where that came from. That there was this idea that market structure regulation had been attempted before. It's never been attempted. But Mr. Massad, just for your sake, I just want to clarify a couple things that you said to make sure you meant to say what you said. Did you call Bitcoin a native token?
Yeah, it's often referred to as a native. In other words, Bitcoin and ETH are referred to as native tokens of the blockchain.
So you're saying Ether and Bitcoin are the same?
Well, I'm classifying both of them as what you call native tokens of the blockchain.
So you're saying that a native token is how you would describe Bitcoin. I just want to be clear of that.
It's a term that's used to describe when you have a blockchain and you have the token that allows you to use that blockchain, that's often called a native token, yes.
Got it. And therein lies exactly why we need to have this market structure regulation. Because the idea that we would turn over this industry to some bureaucrat working at some agency is insane. Because that would make it so that no American company would ever invest in a digital asset company in the United States of America when you had people who are just completely not lacking the fundamental technical base. This reminds me of the Facebook ad where the little old lady's sitting there taking pictures off a physical wall and the guy saying, yeah, none of this works this way. Bitcoin is a commodity. Now, so there was a lot of talk about meme coins and NFTs. So let me ask you this follow-up
Mr.
question.
Chairman, if I,
Senator,
if I may just
no,
say,
I get to ask the
I
question.
was the guy who declared Bitcoin a commodity.
This is the great part about being senator. I get to ask you the questions.
Okay.
So, were you prohibited by law to cooperating with the SEC?
No,
Why didn't you?
I did.
So no, but you just said that what we should do is have the CFTC and the SEC work together.
Yes.
Why didn't you do that?
Well, when I was there, I did that, sir.
So
What
then
I'm
it was,
saying
so
is
you're saying that
Congress,
you solved
Congress
all
shouldn't try to be the regulator.
No, hold on a
sir.
second. You're saying you solved all these problems when you were at the CFTC with the SEC.
No,
So
but
then
we
why do we
solved the
need any-
swap problems.
Okay, so you didn't solve all the problems. So you want us to have the SEC and the CFTC work together. But what you really want is you want Congress to abdicate its responsibilities
No,
to unelected
Not at all.
bureaucrats,
Not
such
at all.
as yourself.
As with
So let me-
Jay Clayton, a
so let
Republican
me-
appointee, he agrees with me on this.
Are you a baseball fan? I assume you're a Red Sox fan up there at Harvard?
No,
right?
I
No?
live in Washington, sir.
Oh, geez, no, Pete. All right, so is a baseball card a security?
No.
What's the difference between a baseball card and a meme coin?
Sir,
No, just what's the difference? How would you explain it to me technically?
they're both, you could classify them both as collectibles.
Is it the government's rule to prevent me from paying $5 million for a 1952 Mickey Mantle?
I think people should be allowed to invest in whatever they want to invest in, sir.
So then, does that mean meme coins as well?
If they want to buy and sell meme coins, that's fine. But
So
we
you don't
should
think
have
I
a
should-
regulatory framework for certain financial
No,
instruments.
no.
We've
I'm
learned
talking
over
about-
the
I'm talking
years
about
that
meme
that's
coins.
useful.
I'm talking about meme coins. Do you think that the government, the SEC or the CFTC should regulate meme coins?
I think we should have an investor protection framework over this, over financial instruments.
I'm gonna
If
take
we
that as
want to
a- so
decide
you're
that
saying
they're
yes?
not financial
Are
instruments,
you saying yes? It's just simple because again, we only have 5. The chairman's very strict. Only lets us have 5 minutes.
I understand that, Senator.
So
but
you're
I
saying
think
yes
you'd-
or no?
I
It's
think you
simple.
might appreciate that it's a more complicated issue than that. At least I would hope you do.
Should it's not complicated. Should the SEC or the CFTC regulate meme coins? It's
The
a
SEC
yes
has
or no.
already said it won't, and that's fine with me.
Okay.
But I'm happy to create a category that's neither a security or a commodity.
Should we include baseball cards in that as well?
No, I don't think we're
Why not?
talking about baseball cards here, sir.
What's the difference?
Because we're talking about a particular technology of tokenization
No,
and
because
blockchain. That's the focus of this
here's what I
matter.
want
We're
my
not
col-
talking
here-
about anything that people trade.
Here's what I want my colleagues to understand. How many business people work at the SEC and the CFTC? How many entrepreneurs? How many people who started companies work there?
I don't have that information, sir.
Let's say none. And then let me just finish this with Mr. Painter with just something that you said, which was also equally staggeringly insane. You said that Congress should not own crypto, correct?
Say, members of Congress should not be investing in the crypto industry.
So you said that we shouldn't own crypto. You shouldn't own crypto.
You know,
That's not
it is
complicated.
very clear if you have your own meme coin. I don't know, Senator, whether you have your own meme coin.
Time out.
It said-
you shouldn't own crypto.
I said you shouldn't be investing in the crypto industry if you have your own crypto trading platform.
So I shouldn't own baseball cards either.
I
Because
didn't
because
talk
Congress
about
regulates
baseball
professional
cards,
Congress
Senator.
regulates professional baseball.
No, I said
Am I allowed to have money in a bank account?
you should be allowed to do what executive branch officials to do, and it would be a criminal offense for an executive branch official under laws passed by this Congress to regulate the crypto industry while holding an interest in a crypto firm. That is just a law, and Congress passed that law and posted it on everyone else
Marino,
except for members
You
of
want
Congress.
to finish your thought on this?
Yeah, my point is, for some reason, I don't understand why, maybe it's just a generational problem. It seems like the crypto industry, that people of a certain generation are just afraid of it. And that fear and lack of knowledge and having the humility to know that you just don't know the technological issues here has made this industry just reticent on understanding that there's a whole new world. And by the way, the 1946 securities laws should not be dictating what we're doing today. And I hope that my colleagues understand it. This is a generational issue. It's not a Democrat versus Republican issue. And if you took the time to just understand the technology, I think it would be easier for us to move forward.
Senator Warnock, you have 6 minutes.
I was going to ask you, Brother Chairman.
Brother Senator, I knew you were going to ask me the question. You're also a pastor, so you get free closing.
Thank you so much. I may not need it.
Thank you.
As this committee begins
Senator,
work
get the rest of the time.
as this committee begins work on bipartisan legislation to provide certainty and clarity to the crypto market, it's critical that any bill we advance provides strong consumer protections. And this is why I'm incredibly concerned about the rise in so-called meme coins. In February, the SEC published a staff statement on meme coins, warning that they expose amateur investors to, quote, rug pull and pump and dump schemes. Mr. Masid, what do you think the effect of this staff memo will be on investors in meme coins, and do you think the SEC will bring civil actions or enforcement against any of these scammers?
Well, Senator, thank you for the question. I think the SEC has said that these are not securities, and I would agree with that. The issue then becomes if they're being listed on platforms such as centralized exchanges where people are trading Bitcoin, what should we do about that? People say we want to regulate those platforms insofar as they trade Bitcoin. We should either say they can't trade other things that aren't regulated, or whatever they trade has to be subject to the same regulations. I think in terms of immediate effects, you have these things being traded, and people can misunderstand them, can get defrauded. I don't expect the SEC or anybody else to take actions about that unless it was really a very, very serious case of fraud, and that would be up to the Justice Department.
So, these issues, I think it's important that we recognize that these aren't theoretical arguments. They impact real people in their actual lives. An analysis of coins issued on Pump.Fund, a popular meme coin generating site, indicated 60% of users on the platform lost money, with 1,700 wallets suffering losses that exceeded $100,000. What do you need, Mr. Masid, what do we need to see in a Senate bill to protect consumers from meme coin scams without sacrificing innovation in the market? I think we don't have to embrace the false choice between innovation and giving consumers reasonable protection. What would you like to see in a Senate bill?
Well, what I'd like to see is consistency between what we allow these centralized exchanges that are trading Bitcoin to trade and what's subject to the bill. In other words, if we're going to regulate those centralized exchanges, when we should do that, and they shouldn't be allowed to list things that aren't then subject to all those same regulations. And right now, the bill is very inconsistent in that respect because it excludes those meme coins from digital commodities, but it doesn't prohibit the listing of those meme coins on these very same exchanges.
So I look forward to working with my Republican colleagues as we think about these issues. This year alone, President Trump and his family have launched a meme coin, a stable coin, and a governance token. The Trump family has also indicated that they may offer a crypto wallet as well as other crypto products. They're quite active in this space. Mr. Painter, how does President Trump's promotion of cryptocurrency, including his meme coin and his family's company, intersect with his official duties and his administration's policies?
If Donald Trump were the Treasury Secretary and regulating crypto and had those interests, he would be guilty of a felony under 18 United States Code 208, the statute I referenced before, which Congress has passed and imposed on every employee of the United States government except for the members of Congress, the president, and the vice president. And this is just unacceptable to have a president who is in charge of the regulatory apparatus for any industry, including crypto, while he has such a vast interest in crypto, including a meme coin that I understand has lost somewhere around 70% of its value since Inauguration Day, I believe. I don't know who lost money on that, but I think I know who made money.
Yeah. Quickly, yes or no. So do you believe that the president having an outsized role in so many digital asset offerings will lead to fair and innovative markets? I think
No, it will lead to a lack of confidence in our regulatory system. Just as like this Congress, everyone's receiving campaign contributions from the crypto industry and voting on this bill, and then if a witness comes here and disagrees with you, you call him a whack job. I mean, this is embarrassing, what's going on in this town.
I agree that President Trump's crypto corruption distorts the digital asset marketplace, and writing a bill with a corruption caveat for the president sends a clear message that Congress is not serious about addressing corruption, which we know undermines investors' faith in capital markets. His corruption creates an unfair market that stifles innovation because his investors justifiably do not want to compete against the President of the United States. Ironically, for those who want to see us do something on market structure, it seems to me that that's not a fair market or a free market. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Amen.
You see, he said amen to the preacher.
I have so many comments for you, Senator. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Lest you run over your time by 60 seconds, we will move on to Senator Haggerty's next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate the leadership that you've demonstrated in this important area. And I also want to commend you and thank my colleagues here on the committee for your actions to support our recent Genius legislation.
Yes, sir.
That provides much needed regulatory certainty in the area of payment stablecoins that I think we desperately needed. And I've also been amazed and very pleased in the wake of that to see the energy and the enthusiasm behind market structure legislation. And I'm very pleased to see this esteemed group of folks here today that are ready to testify to help us with that. For too long, the lack of intelligible definitions, jurisdiction, and pathways to registration from our regulators have forced digital asset innovation beyond our borders. One of the saddest things that I heard as I came into the Senate, talking to members of the industry, with the brilliant people, were taking enforcement, I'm sorry. That creates massive uncertainty. That has lent itself to destroying the possibility of America leading in this incredibly innovative sector. And I'm so pleased to see us moving back in a new direction. So, Mr. Robinson, I'd like to start with you, if I could. In your testimony, you discussed the importance of limiting developer liability so that developers can freely build applications here in the United States. And to be clear for my colleagues, without this sort of limitation, developers could be held legally